thank you very much for joining us here at this World Economic Forum special, where we talk about the road ahead and the future for India's tryst with the fourth industrial revolution. A lot has been said about it. How prepared are we? How geared up are we? Those are the questions that we will ask our eminent panelists here this evening. If you go back to the budget earlier this year, Finance Minister Arun Jaitley had spoken of the government's intention to bring in a degree of alignment with what's happening in the rest of the world when it comes to emerging technologies, when it comes to the use of AI, blockchain, etc. In fact, the NITI Aayog has been tasked with putting together a blueprint for India's roadmap when it comes to these emerging technologies, the consequences and the implications. So let me start then by posing the question to the Commerce Minister, Mr. Suresh Prabhu. Mr. Prabhu, the government is looking at unveiling a new industrial policy, sir. This is going to be our new industrial policy almost after 2 decades. How in sync is this new industrial policy going to be with the challenges and the opportunities that come with the fourth industrial revolution?
Actually, you're absolutely right that last time we did a policy was in 1992. Obviously at a time when India was passing through severe economic issues, and therefore IMF, World Bank, persons were actually wanted India to change. So that was part of the strategy. So the first one, 1956, which again came in at a time when we were under some ideological illusion that we can solve, state can solve all the problems. So today we are actually about this policy essentially, and the only reason why we are doing it is to address the emerging challenges that the world is going to face as a result of this fourth industrial revolution. And therefore, this actually is going to encourage all the new industries to come to India. Will be try to be part of global supply chains, value chains, so that we can actually participate in some segment of that entire economic value that will be added to industry. Therefore, this is a policy which is actually aimed at that. Fourth revolution, when we call it, is actually essentially driven by digital.
Yes.
And therefore, as it is in India, they have already started working on digital inclusion in a very big way. Even small little issues are addressed in digital form, including the major program that Prime Minister launched for about 500 million people, Ayushman Bharat, one of the biggest social welfare scheme and insurance program, is actually through a digital platform. We are in the Ministry of Aviation. We just launched a program for DGR, where we can only look at the face of the person and code it. I was telling that always the media says that we don't take people at the face value. So now we take them at the face value when we enter the airport. So we actually are going to working on that in a very significant way. We'll be very happy to get some ideas. World Economic Forum is the right forum which actually works with so many different stakeholders all over the world. But I am sure that this today's center that we have decided to start will actually help to implement this policy in the spirit and getting all stakeholders together so that we can work together. And this is another important thing is that no country in the world, literally, can say that we are not going to be affected by the new change.
Sure.
Each and every country will be affected, every society has to gear up to face it, and therefore we must work with all our partners all across the world, and World Economic Forum would be the right forum to do that.
Well, I'll come to Murat and his suggestions for India in just a second, but if I could ask you, sir, to give us a timeline of when we can see the government put forward this new industrial policy, because you've been talking about it for a while. And secondly, my question to you is, that as we move into this new era where we are embracing technology, where will India's competitive edge lie? The days of labour arbitrage are now over. If we aspire to up our manufacturing to GDP ratio from the current 16 to 17% to 25%, which has been our aspiration for very long, but hasn't happened, what will be the levers that will drive that in the future?
You know, the policy has been ready for a while now. It has to be approved by the cabinet. We have consulted all the ministries, the government of India, all state governments, all stakeholders. So a lot of consultation has already gone in and it is finally ready. What we have also done is preparing an action plan to implement the policy. Which is also part of a policy. We are keeping it ready. We may not politicize it, but already an action plan of implementation of policy is also put in place. Now, this is because we should not just make a policy, but we should actually start implementing the day we announce the policy. That's exactly the reason for it. On GDP and manufacturing, today, the first draft of a $5 billion vision was released by me. So this is something which I announced when I became the Minister of Commerce and Industry, that we'll try to reach a $5 billion mark by 2025. Today we have released it, which one key component is 20% of the GDP of this $5 billion, that's $1 billion, should come from industry. And in that, what would contribute to that manufacturing has also been spelled out. And this again I have done with all the players who actually make it, including Mr. Adi Godrej, who is sitting here, because he can talk about manufacturing better than me, because he actually manufactures and talks about it. And therefore we actually involved all the top manufacturers of the country, including his brother Samshed, we work with them. CI is involved, they have actually prepared what will really bring into that. So this has been done also.
Okay.
So the idea is 20% first to begin with, from 16% to 20%.
So we've scaled down our target from 25% to 20% now.
Actually that's why I always tell people that normally we feel to reach 25, you have to, actually my arithmetic may not be good. We first must reach 20 to reach 25, right? Because as the aviation minister would say, we want to, the aerospace announced that we are going to fly 35,000 feet. And then the passenger gets up and says, oh, you lied, because we are still at 15,000 feet. To reach 35,000 feet, you have to reach 15,000 feet to begin.
Right. Okay, all right. So that's the target. We're still waiting for a date, which the minister is being guarded about, not giving us a date of when the new policy or the action plan will be unveiled. But Mr. Kant, let me come to you, because Niti Aayog, as I pointed out, has been tasked with putting together the AI roadmap. And the focus areas are going to be agriculture, healthcare, and some of the other areas that the government believes should be prioritized. Where do things stand? How soon can we see this being formalized in some form or fashion?
Shireen, we've already come out with the strategy. It came out on June 4th. We were way ahead of our time. And our belief is that these are areas which will give enormous quantum jump for India in many of these areas. And our belief is that both artificial intelligence and blockchain must be used to drive prosperity for people of India in areas like health, where you can really enhance productivity, use in areas like health, where we are linking up through Ayushman Bharat, about 500 million people from primary health level to the district level, and through the health insurance scheme. More than that, in blockchain, being able to provide, because 60% of the cases relate to land, blockchain technology will bring in huge amount of transparency. And, we are using several models of, we're doing pilot projects with a range of people to see that in pharmaceutical sector, etc., to see that we are able to bring much greater levels of efficiency, tracking, and ensure that benefits reach the people. And I think the challenge is that because India has got no other country is prepared for the fourth industrial revolution like India is. We've created a huge back end today. We have Aadhaar, we have UPI, we have the GST, and now we'll have the health stack. So all this gives you, and you have a billion mobile on the back of it. So no other country has that digital base which India has. And we need to really marshal all our ability to do data mining, do data analytics, and also ensure, because unlike America, where data is owned by Google and Facebook, and unlike China, where it's owned by Alibaba and Facebook, in India, data is held by public entities. So we need to do two things. One is to ensure that a lot of data by public entities is put out in the public domain so that our startups can innovate. And many startups, look at the field of artificial intelligence. You have close to about 300 startups in India who are doing great innovation across education, across health, across agriculture, using artificial intelligence. We need to ensure that data is provided so that India becomes a highly innovative country as far as this is concerned. And secondly, we need to ensure that data flows to our university and academia for good research work. And that, India's challenge is really that India must be able to solve all its problems using artificial intelligence, using drones, using blockchain. And we are in a position where we can make a technological leapfrogging. India has always got into sunset industries. This is the first time India has got this opportunity to get into sunrise industry and take the lead in the world.
Okay. Let me come to Murad. Murad, Mr. Khan's view is that India is in the best position when you compare us to the rest of the world because of the kind of digital backend that we've been able to create. Now, at the World Economic Forum, many surveys and studies have been conducted, and you do believe that India is playing catch up with the rest of the world. It does enjoy certain competitive advantages, especially when it comes to innovation, where we have seen our ranking go up as far as the Global Innovation Index is concerned. So do you agree, A, with the premise set out by Mr. Khan that India is the best positioned, and B, what more needs to be done for us to actually leverage the advantages that we enjoy today?
The answer to the first question is absolute. I think India has a unique opportunity to move from an economy driven by labor arbitrage to one driven by, if I may say so, data arbitrage. Because data is the oxygen for a lot of these developments. And if you lock it up in companies and not make it available for research or startups, you get in the way of proper usage of the data to solve some of these problems. So what we have seen in India at national and state level is the desire, driven by the rankings, to jump ahead. And we cannot use historical models to predict the future because nobody can.
Right.
But with the proper policies, with proper engagement of the business community and the right data policy, we can really create an environment where these technologies can not only be harnessed here, used here, but be a role model for the rest of the world. So it's a unique opportunity. And that's why we are opening our center in India. We started in San Francisco, Japan, China, and India makes absolute sense for us. And the same questions are being asked around the world. And I think India is uniquely positioned. I would say Japan is also very well positioned. They have a different demographic situation, declining population, aging population. Yeah. But I think India is uniquely positioned to take advantage.
You know, you spoke of having a data policy in place that will then provide the checks and balances, the safeguards as well. India is in the midst of trying to put a data protection and privacy policy in place. What are the lessons perhaps from global examples that we need to keep in mind as we go about doing that, especially as we gear up for this digital era?
The lessons is ignore what happened in the past. Because there's no role model. But I had my gene sequenced 8 years ago, and they asked me to share it. I said, no way. And we're talking to the chief scientist of a startup nation. And his daughter developed a blood test to detect pancreatic cancer long before the symptoms kick in. It's a life-saving situation. She lives in Massachusetts. She proved it with her data. She needed data from nearby hospitals. This is in the US. She could see it, she could touch it, she could not use it because of data privacy laws. And it's the United States, the largest economy, so there's no role model. But if you can open up data and allow the users to codify how the data can be used. So if I can say anyone wanting to use my data for cancer research, they can use it free of charge forever. But if they want to use it for drug discovery, they have to ask for my permission and pay me. Then we can really create this data ecosystem. And I can do that with blockchain smart contracts. Attach the contract to the data, so when somebody launches the application, the data finds the application.
Right.
And if they want to pay me, how do we monetize the data? How do we value data? Well, here blockchain tokens, not cryptocurrency, can come in. Maybe the government and the companies can issue tokens to use my data. And why not set up a national token exchange, much like a commodity exchange, to monetize that? So there's no role model, but there's an opportunity.
Okay, that's an interesting idea, national token exchange when it comes to trading in data. Mr. Prabhu, you want to make a quick comment on that, on the road ahead as far as India's data policy is concerned?
I think we have a great advantage because all the ingredients that are necessary for making it happen are already there in India. See, we are already a largely industrialized country. Maybe the sixth in the world in terms of industrialized nation. We already have a large number of people who are using digital technologies in their day-to-day life. When I was the railway minister, I could see 70% of the people who book railway ticket use digital platform. So they know exactly what to do. So therefore that is also a part of a day-to-day life. So there is no inhibition. Because technology's biggest problem is, when you want to use technology, first problem you have to cross your own mindset. That's already there. Thirdly, I can see now you have a little bit of a late more advantage. Because if you have created infrastructure and everything already, then would have lost out. So therefore, because you are becoming redundancies, will be so costly that we don't want to get into that.
Okay.
Like that, in India, we have a possibility of all the new industries. In fact, incidentally, that is the focus of the new industrial policy. How to modernize the present ones, at the same time, how do you embrace the new ones, which will be actually be available. So this is a great possibility.
Okay.
Therefore, I was saying why we should collaborate and why we should always be there to compete.
Well, thank you very much for that vote of confidence, sir. But let me go across to Chavi. Chavi, you know, a lot of what we've heard here is the sort of top-down vision of what the government hopes to be able to achieve with whether it's the use of AI, blockchain, digital technologies, and so on and so forth. Give us a ground reality of what this actually means on the ground, how citizens are using or accessing technology for empowerment, for accessing government services, what's working, what's not, what needs to be fixed.
So what has already been said, what government has been able to do is improve data services through the usage of technology. But that is, if you're looking at it from the perspective of the fourth industrial revolution, we are way, way behind. Because I personally feel that when you speak of the government, data services, transparency, etc., is a given. It should have already been there. So in that respect, we've made a step forward, but again, there are certain pockets in the rural sector which are not necessarily far removed from existing urban space. If you just go a few kilometers beyond, say even the top 8-10 cities, there are many villages which still do not benefit from those. Also because there is a certain element or a mindset within the government framework working at the grassroots which fears technology and if it does not want to adopt it. So while there may be a political will, I think it needs to be far stronger to ensure that people at the last mile, and I'm referring to including those who are working in panchayats, they need to realize that it's something that is an enabler that will make life easier for them rather than be something that they should be threatened by. So that is where I think there's a gap that lies. But in the context of the topic, which is the fourth industrial revolution, I feel talking just about data services or the service delivery through such data is not really the answer. We have to look way beyond that and go way beyond that. Because if you look at people, and especially the demographic, the youth that we keep talking about as far as India is concerned, in villages, people don't even have access to basic education. When I say basic, it's primary to mid-school education itself is so pathetic that you can't really expect them to be
part of the new age workforce.
Absolutely. Yeah. And on top of that, we don't have any skill sets made available to the youth. So when they're aspiring to do something or looking at finding jobs, they don't have the skill sets to do so. And while, yes, disruption has happened in the businesses and the private sector, when we really see it in the urban sector, but in terms of making these youth and making the younger India ready for these markets, we are lagging way behind. So there's a lot that needs to happen, and I would say we need to focus primarily on ensuring that the basic foundation of education needs to be stronger, skilling India, and I think more than just focusing on higher education, we also need to bring in vocational training with short-term certified courses, which makes people realize that they have talent, it skills them, and also gives them a sense of pride. Right now, if you look at the youth, they are moving away from agriculture. It's a beautiful vocation. There's technology, there's immense stuff that is happening in agriculture alone. But we in India are not benefiting from it. So farmers, parents themselves do not want their children becoming farmers. So we are losing as far as the assets, creating those assets, human assets, and adding to that value for the country, I think we're lagging way, way behind.
Well, that is an important point, and that is a significant gap that needs addressing and needs to be bridged. But Sanjeev, let me ask you now, since we're talking about how ready India is to capitalize from this advantage, what is it going to mean in terms of enhanced automation? And what is that then going to mean in terms of jobs? Because I think that's where the fear lies. That is AI going to come in and disrupt supply chains, disrupt manufacturing, assembly lines? do away with the need for people. And the other question is this mismatch. Chavi was talking about not having the requisite skills, but you don't have the jobs and the matching skills as well. So how do you ensure that there is a greater degree of that alignment as well as we move forward?
So if we go by history and see how different nations have created wealth and how they really have created the workforce and the industrialization, you will see that each one of them used the technologies as well as the period offered. Like say recent times, a very large country which is never, they have created a lot of wealth in the last 30-40 years because they rode the wave of globalization and
large-scale manufacturing.
Internet basically and then they of course went for the scale manufacturing. I think India has an opportunity now with the advent of Industry 4.0, with the technologies available like AI, AR, VR, drones, the now forthcoming blockchain. These are the new technologies. If we harness them well in our country by frameworks and policy, I think all the points that you mentioned, I think they can be addressed. Like let me just give you a few examples which are commonly addressed topics. One is talking about creating a digital workforce. Now, one can say that do we need PhDs? Yes, we need PhDs at a certain level of work because we do very high quality R&D work for the global organizations out of our country. Do we need engineers? Yes. Do we need diploma holders? Yes. We need ITIs? Yes. We also need semi-skilled and low-skilled people because they are part of the population and we need to push income through them. Now if you really look into the technology that is available today, like for example AR and VR, wherein you can actually simulate and train people using the video simulation as well as actual simulation, you can actually take a non-skilled person or a semi-skilled person using the AI as well as the simulation technology, you can train them on certain job which can be done without going through the classroom training. If they have missed the classroom, they can still be trained to work on the workshops, etc. This year, for an example, we opened LAB to smart factories, and we are using semi-skilled workers, but they are assisted by screens in front of them which run the videos as well as parameters, and they are able to do highly skilled assembly work.
Okay.
And then if you are having the data coming from this assembly line, you can still manage and control the quality that is typically required from this fully skilled worker.
Okay.
So there is an opportunity how you deploy technology.
So how many people have you been able to train, the low skilled workers who've been able to upskill?
Well, I think we started this factory say in April, and we are running a line with about 200 people, right? So, but the point I'm trying to make is that if you take a village example, like Rajasthan, wherein you have a lot of solar power plants coming up. These are the assets which will stay for next 25 years. Somebody needs to maintain those assets. You can have the boys in village who can be trained to maintain those equipment for these large companies rather than you send the people from outside to maintain them. And you can use the simulation technology of AR, VR, wherein you can actually see the equipment, you can open it by the layers, and you know exactly how to do it every time. You can send the updates of it. And even the basic education you want to deliver to the primary school, you don't require big infrastructure. These technologies can be a big enablement, and we have the bandwidth going into panchayats. I think it's just a matter of how we imagine it and how we create the next value cycle for the country.
Well, speaking of creating the next value cycle, let me ask you this, Mr. Prabhu, because along with the new industrial policy, your ministry is also working on being able to revive or resuscitate the idea of special economic zones and focus more on creating employment economic enclaves. How important is it again going to be to link these employment enclaves that you currently envisage with the idea that we're talking about today, with the future?
We are a very special kind of a situation in India because we are obviously the largest population and we have a different segments of population in society. We must take care of each one of them in different ways. And what you are saying is absolutely right that inevitably we may use the best of technologies, blockchain, all that, but over a period of time we have to make sure that somebody gets some gainful employment. That's going to be a major issue for India.
Yes.
And fourth industrial revolution is inevitably going to displace jobs then they create more jobs. This is unfortunately going to be a reality. So therefore, while we embrace it, you must also have a strategy to make sure that how do you employ such a large number of people.
Yeah.
And therefore, I think one good part of the new evolution that will be there is there will be a lot of servicification of industrial application. A lot of servicification will happen. So services have the ability to create more jobs. So what the special economic zones and other, I think what you are absolutely right, what we are really trying to focus on is to find out how do you actually marry both. We don't want to prevent the new technology from coming in, so we want to encourage it, we want to embrace it. At the same time, how do you ensure that large number of people will also find jobs? And that's a challenge. It's not an easy thing to do, because so many new activities can be done by the machine, what the man is going to do. So we have to actually find it out. It always happened. This was a choice which people had to make all the time. In fact, I always keep saying this, that first industrial revolution, people were thinking now it's going to be a problem because all the horse cart, they thought that their job is gone and the railways is going to come, so they are finished. But that time, there was not so much of displacement. There was a replacement, not displacement. But today, I think this is going to be a major issue. So we have to find out, that's what we are studying, to find out ideas wherein we can create more jobs. And one of the great opportunities there is to link farm to factories. You know, if we can create those supply chains between farm and factories, on the full supply chain can create jobs. Another thing is, those who will be using technology on a massive scale, they might also need back-ended applications to be carried out by somebody. They can play a very key role. But all of this would need that we will have to study and properly inventorize the kind of population, what type of training we should give them, and therefore what my friend said is absolutely right, education will be a key role. And education, by definition, is not a degree that we get it out at the end of the term. Education should be an ongoing process to train and retrain people, find out who's becoming redundant, what to be absorbed, and that to do on a massive scale like this in India is going to be a challenge. So bringing local communities, local panchayats, and then they can play a key role to understand what is happening. So enclave, what you mentioned, is in that context. That we must find out an opportunity that can be created and actually work with them and create such enclaves befitting a local opportunity that exists.
So when will we see the enclave policy being unveiled? That's the second one you said you're ready with, sir. Give us a timeline also now on this one. When will we see this?
I wish I was a TV anchor in which 30 minutes I had to finish everything. But unfortunately, we have to work through this. We are working on all of this. And I think we'll make sure that we'll try to do a project. It's something which is really an ongoing exercise.
Okay.
We are talking to all the states. We are working with the community. It's a massive thing that we really need to put into place. Employment and the nature of employment is undergoing a sea change. So while we are changing industrial scene 04, we are talking about 40, but at the same time, we have to understand that the profile of job itself is undergoing a change.
Yeah.
And therefore, this is a new thing we are entering. This is something which we cannot use our past experience to manage the future. See, this is another thing. The past experience will be your biggest enemy to deal with the future. That is how it is going to be. And therefore, we cannot just fall back upon what has happened in the past and try to strategize. You have to think ahead, and that no one can do as good as some prophets can do. So we have to work in a way that we have to work in talking to people, understanding it, working with the communities, working with the global players, and try to devise it.
Okay, so the strategy is still in the process of being designed and devised. It's not ready just yet. Yes, Tavi, you want to make a point?
I'm glad to hear that, but I think when we're looking at India as a country, and as you mentioned, it's often a very top-down approach. I'm glad Mr. Prabhu is saying that we need to interact with the communities. But we look traditionally, India has been very rich in its craft, tradition, culture. But when we're looking at development and the term industrialization, I often feel there's focus limited to specific industries or sectors, and we're not really looking at what, say for example, Laghu Udyog or small-scale industries or cottage industries used to do really well. But as of now, if you look around the country, they've diminished in many areas, disseminated. owing to which a lot of traditional crafts have also disappeared. So I think if we can create those entrepreneurship and therefore the short-term courses, step-by courses, which will allow for people to be entrepreneurs within the villages and create an ecosystem where an individual alone would perhaps also empower other people from within the village. I think the stress upon the country and the issue of scale could also be taken into account, and that I think would be far more doable rather than just looking at a certain pocket which unfortunately gets restricted to industries, certain services and the urban sector alone. But the government cannot do it alone. We need the private sector to also participate. So I think the government also has to ensure that makes it easier for the private sector to do so. Because often I hear private sector complaining that the PPP model doesn't work, it's not given the freedom that they would want.
Yes, and that is a story that has played across sector after sector. The PPP model has its limitations, has its constraints. So, Murad, I want to ask you about the displacement issue that the minister just raised here. What are you seeing happen as far as major developed economies are concerned in terms of displacement, and what is the outlook for India when it comes to displacement on account of the emerging technologies being adopted?
We hosted a workshop on this topic on future of jobs with one of the G7 countries. They're close to full employment, and they're worried about the same question. And they're in a position where their history is baked in, and they find it difficult to adjust to the new world. So whether you're emerging or emerging country developing, it's the same question. And I agree with you here with the Minister. We cannot look at the past and say what happens to these jobs. We have to project what the future we want is, that's inclusive and delivering value. Now walk backwards and create the policies and the environment rapidly. And our iteration time frame is 18 months at a time, to make sure that we move towards that future and converging the jobs of the future, not look at the jobs of yesterday. And here I think India has a unique potential, and if you look at the artisans, why not create marketplaces, electronic marketplaces, where they can market their products, not just in India, but around the world. Why not create the logistics infrastructure, maybe enabled by drones, so that these things can be delivered? Why not use blockchain to create the certificate of origin and the royalty payments back? I think the jobs do not have to be in the big cities, but we can, through the connectivity and these underlying infrastructure projects that we're taking on, initiatives, we can make sure that it reaches to the people living in the outskirts of the cities, not just in the cities.
Yeah. So, Mr. Kant, let me ask you, sir, because you've always been a big believer in shock therapy, in wanting to do big things and do them quickly. So, what can we expect now? If I were to ask you 5 specific priority areas where we could see action over the next 12 months.
So first, I think you need to really skill and reskill your force. Number 2, I think you need to make your labor force multi-skilled, very adaptive, very, very flexible. And number 3, I think you need to unleash what Niti Aayog has already done. That is, we've brought in the biggest disruption in our education system by starting tinkering labs in schools. We've done 3,000 of them, where we do provide robots, 3D printers, Internet of Things, all from class 6 onwards. We need to scale them up 100x. And I tell you, we just had this competition with IIT students, public school students and children from a slum school, and we found that the children from the slum school were far more innovative than the IIT students because they were able to solve the problems which they were confronted with. Fourthly, I think you need to bring in a lot of more incubation centers across so that, startups need to be handheld and pushed further. And fifthly, to my mind, number of startups are doing remarkable work in the field of social innovation. I mean, look at education. Look at what people are doing to improve learning outcomes using artificial intelligence. Or look at what is happening in the health sector, Consio, Forus, many of them, brilliant startups. I think we need to really push the limits where social innovation will happen through young startups. Government must be just only be the facilitator and catalyst. Rest of the innovation must happen from the private sector and young Indians.
And hopefully the government will not stifle the private sector or stifle innovation.
No, government must create the right ecosystem, be just the catalyst and push the limits.
Okay, we've got 5 minutes more to go before we wrap. Anyone here with a question for our panel? I'd request you to raise your hands. We'll get a microphone across to you. Okay, I think we've answered everybody's questions here. So let me wrap-up comments. And Minister, I'll start by asking you a priority area that you intend to focus on to ensure that we are prepared for the new world, as it were.
I think, first you have to accept the reality that any new technology, you cannot prevent it. It is like no one can say that I am going to stop tsunami from entering my territory. It is not possible. So if it is a reality and it is inevitability, then the only way the response of any society should be, how do you make best of it? And that is what we want to do, is to ride it to an extent that we benefit from it, to respond to it in a way that wherever there is a threat perception coming in, that's what I call displacement, how to create alternate opportunities so that we give everybody a chance to be gainfully employed. And that's what we are doing, and that's what this massive skilling program that we are trying to do. In fact, there is going to be, over a period of time, a need for services to be rendered to so many large number of people. So maybe on shop floor, you will see displacement on shop floors, but not necessarily in the society as a whole. The entire requirement of people will still be there. So that's what we need to identify and train people accordingly, and that's what it should be our idea to be arranged. So we welcome the port industry. We cannot prevent it in any case. I'd like to join with all our friends all over the world to make sure that we benefit in a way that creates opportunities for all.
So Murat, the one thing that India must focus on.
Now, when we launched the center, somebody asked me if this is another think tank. And I said, would rather be a do tank. So focusing on doing would be what we would recommend. That's what we intend to do with active participation.
Chavi? The one thing that you would like the government to focus on, or the private sector?
I think the government has to look at the country as a whole when speaking of development and being far more inclusive rather than just focusing on the urban sector and those who already are up there. I believe that unless something we do not think about every individual in the country, development really cannot really feature anywhere. And I often hear that the issue is of the population scale, and I think that's going to appeal to the private sector. The private sector has to participate. But for that, the government has to ensure that the infrastructure has to be laid out, and that's not just data. Even just connected to your roads, water, electricity, which should be the basic rights and given to every individual, to every village, does not exist. And that's why I've noticed I've been a surpreneur for 9 years now, I'm in my second term. And I'm so close to the city of Jaipur. I'm just 1.5 hours driving distance, 9 years, and still not a single person from even the private organization has come forward to help us in skilling and empowering our children and youth and the residents of the village, which only makes me wonder what's going to happen to the many more who stay, further away from cities. So we have to change that, and I think each one of us seated here, living in this country, living outside of the country, we have to realize that we all are interrelated. We all are living on the same planet, and the world has become so small that unless until we don't help each other out, there's no way we will survive. And while we're working on whatever we're choosing to work, I think it's also important that we think ethically and work ethically, when we're not just thinking of human development, but also thinking of being human-friendly and environment-friendly. That, I think, is what is missing, especially in countries like ours.
Absolutely. Sanjeev, I'll give you the final say on the priority, the number one priority that you would like.
Well, from my perspective, given that we have new set of technologies and new set of tools available in our hand, and India as a country, we are also very rich with problem statements we need to solve. So I would say with these tools and the problem statements we have, let's dream big, start small, but most importantly, start.
All right. I think that's a good note to end this conversation on. As Murad said, the theme for the centre is not to just do the thinking, but also to get down to doing the doing, and it'll be these two gentlemen who will have to do a lot of the heavy lifting. So we wish you the very best of luck, Mr. Prabhu, Mr. Khan, Murad, Chavi and Sanjeev. Appreciate you joining us here to talk about the road ahead, India's challenges and opportunities with the fourth industrial revolution and what it could mean for our economy going forward. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us here this evening.